"You're in the wrong store, sweetheart. Unless you're here to clean the glass." The words didn't just land. They detonated. The manager's voice rang out across the pristine marble floors, echoing off glass displays like a slap heard in a courtroom. Silence blanketed the showroom as the atmosphere turned cold and clinical. Rachel Kim, the store manager, had said it loud enough for everyone to hear, the wealthy couple by the diamond bracelets, the young clerk nervously straightening the watch case, even the security guard by the door. But the woman she was speaking to didn't flinch. Dr. Camille Hayes stood rooted just inside the entrance of Whitmore and Reed Jewelers, one hand lightly resting on her daughter's shoulder. Natalie, 17 and soft-spoken, shrank back as if the insult had burned her skin. The air, once filled with soft classical music and the faint scent of sandalwood, now felt tight, judgmental, as eyes turned, not just to watch, but to weigh. But Camille didn't snap, didn't shout. She simply looked at Rachel with a poise that made the moment even more unbearable. "Before we go any further, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. If stories about dignity over hate matter to you, hit like and subscribe. Now, let me take you inside the most prestigious jewelry store on Madison Avenue, where a world-famous black designer was mistaken for a nobody, and everything changed in just over an hour. It was exactly 3:12 p.m. on a crisp Wednesday afternoon when Camille and Natalie entered the store. Camille wore a navy trench coat over a white silk blouse and gray slacks. No flashy purse, no bodyguard, no camera crew, just grace. Natalie looked even simpler. A neat bun, light cardigan, sneakers, and a look of wonder only a teenage girl could carry as she gazed at the diamonds glittering under glass. They looked like a mother and daughter spending an afternoon in the city, because that's what they were, except no one in the store saw them that way. The moment they stepped inside, eyes flicked over them, not welcoming, assessing, judging. Karen and Douglas Whitmore, a wealthy white couple near the emerald earrings, had already started whispering. Karen's voice held that smug, overpronounced tone as she nudged her husband. "Oh, look. Doug. The help must have wandered off the freight elevator." Douglas chuckled as if it were clever. Camille heard it. Natalie heard it. So did Rachel. But she didn't say a word. Rachel approached with the kind of smile people use when they're trying to hide a sneer. "Welcome to Whitmore and Reed," she said, her tone clipped and forced. "We have a private viewing room for preferred clients, and a general browsing section, over there, if you'd like to take a look." She gestured not toward the sapphire display or the platinum showcase, but to a single case by the wall marked "Seasonal Gifts." Camille simply replied, "We're here to look. Thank you." Natalie, spotting a delicate lilac pendant, a hand-blown Murano glass piece, stepped slightly forward, her eyes lighting up. But Ava Morales, a young Latina sales associate, intercepted her. "Actually, those are kind of, delicate." Her words stumbled. Her eyes flicked to Rachel, who had already started walking toward the sapphire rings at the center display. Camille moved with purpose. She stopped at the sapphire section, admiring a deep blue cushion-cut piece set in white gold. "I'd like to try this one. Please." Rachel blinked at her, then folded her arms. "That's from our executive collection," she said, letting the words hang like a velvet rope. "Usually reserved for members or clients with an existing profile." "And if I'd like to become one?" Camille asked calmly. Rachel gave a half smile. "Let's just say it's selective," before Camille could respond. Karen stepped closer again, the scent of expensive perfume clinging to her disdain. "It's cute that she brought her daughter along," she said to Douglas, loud enough for others to hear. "Let the girl dream, I suppose." Natalie stiffened, and for the first time, her lower lip quivered. "Pretend what?" she whispered to her mother. Karen turned, her eyes cold. "Oh, sweetheart, it's just fun to look, isn't it? I used to play dress-up in stores, too, before I grew up." Camille kept her voice even. "We're not here to pretend. We're here to choose," Rachel scoffed, stepping between Camille and the glass case. "Let's be honest," she said in a low voice, still audible. "This collection isn't for everyone." The implication dripped from every syllable. Ava, behind the counter, froze. She looked at Camille, then at Natalie, and for a second, her lips parted as if she were about to say something. But Rachel shot her a glance, and just like that, Ava turned away. Camille's eyes didn't budge. Natalie looked like she might cry. Then, the door opened again. Jordan Wells stepped inside. He looked like any other customer. Coat, briefcase, quiet manner. But he was a journalist, and something about the energy in the store didn't sit right with him. As Karen started laughing, "Maybe a candy necklace would be more her speed." Jordan slid his phone out of his pocket and hit record. He kept it low, casual, but he didn't miss a second. Natalie took her mother's hand. "Let's just go, Mom." Camille didn't move. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. Still. "No, I'd like to speak to the owner." Rachel's smirk returned, full force. "He's unavailable. And you, ma'am, are clearly in the wrong place." That's when Ava gasped softly. Even Karen blinked. But Camille didn't react. She simply turned, eyes steady. As a door in the back of the showroom began to open, the hush in the room deepened. Jordan kept recording, and what happened next would change not only the course of that afternoon, but the way this store, and everyone in it, saw power, elegance, and identity, not loud, not angry, but undeniable. Camille stood still, her hand gently wrapped around Natalie's. The hush in the store was loud now, louder than the background music, louder than the clicking heels of Karen Whitmore pacing dramatically, louder even than the outrage quietly boiling under the surface of every judgmental glance. Camille wasn't here to argue. She wasn't here to beg for service. She was here to observe. And the ugliness was unfolding all on its own. Still, she tried, not for herself, but for her daughter, who had never seen this kind of public humiliation in such a gilded place. Camille turned back to the sapphire ring, the one in the executive collection, and asked Rachel calmly, "Is there a reason you won't let me try it on?" Rachel tilted her head, folding her arms across her chest as if to brace for something inconvenient. "I'm trying to protect you from disappointment," she said, a smile tugging at one corner of her mouth. "That ring is valued at over $85,000. We don't take it out for impulse browsing." The word impulse hit Natalie like a shove. She looked up at her mother, her lips tightening as her eyes glistened. "We're not here to browse," Camille said evenly. "And I know very well what sapphire is worth," before Rachel could fire back. Karen stepped closer again, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's adorable, really," she said, gesturing to Natalie. "Like a mother-daughter date day. Maybe you can find something in the costume section. A little sparkle never hurt anyone." Douglas chuckled beside her, but Jordan, now near the front, had heard enough. He took a few steps closer, still filming subtly. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Rachel, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you refusing service based on appearance?" Rachel turned to him, instantly annoyed by the challenge. "Excuse me? I've been standing here for 3 minutes," Jordan said. "No one's asked me about my income bracket." Karen scoffed. "Oh, please, don't play the race card. It's so overused it's lost all meaning." "Tell that to my daughter," Camille said, her voice low, her arm tightening protectively around Natalie. "She's 17. And this is her first time in a store like this. Rachel rolled her eyes. Well, maybe next time she can come with someone who actually shops here. Ava dropped the stack of inventory cards she was holding. She crouched down quickly to gather them, using the moment to hide her expression. Shame, anger, maybe both. She knew what was happening, and it didn't sit right with her. Still, she didn't speak up. Not yet. Natalie's voice cracked. Mom, can we just go? Camille looked down at her daughter. We could, she said softly. But then they'd think they were right. Natalie swallowed her tears. Her mother's calm was both comforting and infuriating. How could she be so composed when they were being humiliated in front of everyone? Why don't you tell them who you are? Natalie whispered. Camille looked at her, then at Rachel, then back toward the frosted glass office at the rear of the store. Because I want to see how far they'll take it, she said under her breath. Because if we walk away, they'll just do it to the next girl. That's when Rachel stepped forward, signaling to Liam, the security guard. Without saying a word, Liam hesitated. He'd been watching the whole interaction, quietly, like always. He wasn't just a bystander, he was security. But even he seemed unsure whether what was happening warranted an intervention, or a witness. Rachel smiled tightly. I'm going to ask you one last time, she said. If you don't intend to make a purchase, I'll have to ask you to leave. We can't have people loitering around high-value merchandise, especially with a minor. Jordan spoke again. They're not loitering. She asked a question. You gave her a judgment. Sir, you need to mind your business. Rachel snapped. This is a private establishment, Karen added. It's not the subway. Not everyone gets a free ride. The store grew crowded. A couple more customers had wandered in, catching enough of the tone to stay quiet and pretend to browse. But everyone was listening. One woman, Denise Carter, a regular client draped in a cream shawl and layered gold bangles, walked over quietly to Rachel and whispered, You might want to rethink how you're handling this. Denise, Rachel said sharply, I've got it under control. Denise didn't respond. She just stepped back, folded her arms, and started watching like a juror waiting for closing arguments. Then, the door to the back office opened. Out stepped Thomas Reed, co-founder of the store and the man whose name hung next to Whitmore on the gold-lettered logo. His suit was understated but impeccably cut, and his eyes scanned the room with a businessman's instinct. Is there a problem out here? He asked. His voice wasn't raised, but it cut through the noise like a conductor's baton. Rachel spun around, instantly shifting tones. No, Mr. Reed, just some confusion. A customer misunderstanding. Karen's voice chimed in. Thank goodness, we were about to leave. It's gotten a little tense in here. Thomas's eyes moved across the room, from Jordan and his quietly recording phone, to Denise's folded arms, to Ava's flustered stance behind the counter, but they settled on Camille, and that's when something shifted. His face broke into a slow, genuine smile. Well, he said, this is a surprise. Rachel looked confused. Sir? Dr. Hayes, Thomas said, stepping forward. Welcome back. We've missed you. The room froze. Even Liam took a step forward, eyebrows raised. Natalie's hand tightened in her mother's. Camille gave Thomas a gracious nod. I wanted to see how things were going. Rachel's jaw slackened. Dr. Hayes? She repeated, almost inaudibly. Karen frowned. Wait, what's going on? Dr. Hayes, Thomas said to the room, turning slightly so his voice carried, is our lead investor and our design partner. Half of the pieces in this store were created or commissioned by her, including the sapphire ring you refused to show her. Rachel stepped back, visibly shaken. Karen's lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. Douglas reached for her elbow, guiding her quietly away. Ava looked like she might cry. Jordan stopped recording for a second and whispered to Camille, "Do you mind if I post that later?" Camille looked around the room, at the faces now humbled, now listening. "Go ahead," she said. "Let the world see what everyday dignity looks like under pressure." And with that, she turned back to the case and the ring, not to ask, but to claim what was already hers. The silence after Thomas Reed's revelation wasn't just awkward, it was surgical. Every face in the store shifted. Karen Whitmore, once so smug, now looked as if the floor might swallow her. Her husband Douglas tried to usher her away gently, but Karen stood frozen, eyes darting from Camille to Rachel, then to Thomas, and back again, as if searching for some logical escape route. But logic was no longer on her side. Camille didn't move. She didn't gloat, didn't grin, didn't raise her voice. She simply let the truth settle into the room like dust that had been disturbed. Her hands still rested gently on Natalie's shoulders, who, for the first time since they entered, stood tall. Rachel Kim, meanwhile, was unraveling. Her arms had dropped from their defensive fold. Her voice, once cold and commanding, now trembled with professional panic. "Mr. Reed," she stammered, I wasn't aware." But Thomas didn't acknowledge her yet. His eyes were still on Camille, and there was a familiarity there, not just respect, but admiration. "If I'd known you were stopping by," he said, "I would have cleared my schedule." Camille gave a soft nod. "I didn't want a welcome party. I wanted perspective." And that's when it happened. Rachel, in a last-ditch effort to reclaim some sense of control, turned sharply to Ava. "Can you take Miss Hayes to the viewing lounge?" Her voice was suddenly too cheerful, too desperate, like a hostess who just realized the VIP guest was actually the restaurant's secret critic. But Camille didn't move. She didn't budge. Instead, she gently reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a slim black card, a metal emblem embossed with the initials CH, her personal brand seal. She placed it on the glass countertop above the executive collection ring. "This ring," she said calmly, "was named after my grandmother, Clara, designed in her honor. You'd know that if you ever read our internal design memos." Rachel flushed red. I only manage front operations, not internal collections." "You manage more than the cases," Camille interrupted, her voice still soft but with a blade underneath. "You manage culture, first impressions, tone. Every customer who walks through this door, whether they look like money or not, gets filtered through your lens. And that lens today," she said, pausing as her eyes locked onto Rachel's, "was cracked." Karen's voice piped up again, trembling now. "But how are we supposed to know? You walked in here like what?" Camille asked without turning. The whole store was still. Even Jordan, who had resumed filming from behind a nearby display, paused his breath. Karen floundered. "Not like an owner." "Good," Camille said, "because owners shouldn't have to announce themselves to be treated with decency." At that, Natalie, still holding her mother's hand, stepped slightly forward, her voice steady for the first time. "And daughters shouldn't be mocked for asking to see a necklace." Ava suddenly moved, not to escape, not to shrink, but to stand beside Camille. "Dr. Hayes," she said, eyes glossy with regret. "I'm sorry. I froze. I knew what was happening was wrong. It's not about freezing," Camille replied, turning to her. "It's about choosing what to do when you thaw." The words landed hard. Ava nodded slowly. "Then I choose now." She turned to Rachel. "You don't speak for me." Rachel opened her mouth to respond, but Thomas raised his hand. "Enough!" The word, though quiet, thundered in its authority. "Camille," he said, "would you prefer to speak in private?" Camille shook her head gently. "No. This started in public. Let's end it in public." She turned and addressed the store. "I asked to speak to the owner not to flaunt authority, but to test the integrity of this space. This store carries my vision, my brand, and my legacy. But today, that wasn't what people saw when I walked in. They saw color. They saw simplicity in our clothes and made assumptions. They decided we didn't belong. That has to change." Rachel took one hesitant step forward. "Dr. Hayes, I truly didn't know who you were. If I had, I never would have." "And that's the problem," Camille said, cutting her off. "If I had been a teacher, a nurse, an artist, if I had been anyone other than who I am, your behavior would have stayed the same, and that makes it worse." Rachel went quiet, visibly shaken. Natalie glanced up at her mother, pride filling her eyes. "You didn't yell," she whispered. "You didn't raise your voice." Camille looked at her daughter. "Justice doesn't always shout. Baby, sometimes it just shows up and stays standing." From the far end of the store, Denise Carter, the loyal customer who had earlier voiced concern, stepped forward. "If this place is going to carry your name and your work, then it should carry your standards too," she said. "Not just in diamonds, but in dignity." Camille nodded slowly. "Agreed." That's when Thomas turned toward the front, where Liam the security guard had been silently watching the entire time. "Liam, can you please ask all staff to come to the main floor? We're having a team reset. Right now?" "Yes, sir," Liam said without hesitation, and for the first time. His tone held something else. Respect. Rachel looked like she might crumble. Ava stood straighter. Jordan caught every angle on camera. As staff began trickling from the back, the store suddenly felt less like a showroom and more like a courtroom. Camille stepped back and gave Natalie a small nod. "Go sit near the window for a moment," she whispered. "This next part's for the grown-ups." Natalie obeyed, walking with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there 90 minutes ago. Her mother had just dismantled an entire system without raising a single finger, and the woman she was becoming, the one watching and learning, was going to remember every second. Camille turned back toward the staff now gathered in a semicircle, Rachel in the center, Ava to the side, and Thomas standing tall behind her. She didn't need to raise her voice. She just needed to speak, and everyone was listening. Rachel stood at the center of the sales floor like a house of cards waiting for the wrong breeze. Around her, the entire staff of Whitmore and Reed had gathered. 10 associates, a silent security guard, and one rattled manager trying to mask fear behind a frozen smile. Camille Hayes stood across from her, not behind the counter, not up on a podium, just eye level, calm, grounded, immovable. At that moment, she wasn't just a silent partner or a design visionary. She was the embodiment of everything the store claimed to stand for: elegance, excellence, and above all, integrity. And now, she was here to see if those values actually meant anything. Rachel tried one last time to shift the energy. She turned to Thomas, voice pitched upward in panicked professionalism. "Mr. Reed, I just want to clarify. This was a misunderstanding. I had no idea who she was. I thought—" Her voice trailed off. The truth hung in the space she couldn't fill. "You thought I was nobody," Camille finished gently. "That's what you were about to say, wasn't it?" Rachel flushed, her shoulders twitching toward a shrug. "It's not that." "But it is," Camille said. "Because if I'd walked in here in diamonds and silk, you would have stood up straighter. If I had an entourage, or a publicist, or looked like the magazine cover version of wealth, you would have offered champagne. Instead, you offered condescension. And that is precisely the culture I refuse to endorse. Karen, still hovering near the emerald display, suddenly found her voice again. Look, I didn't know this place was under new management, but let's not make this into a whole racial thing. Her attempt at nonchalance sounded hollow. Sometimes people just make assumptions. Camille didn't even look at her. Assumptions, she said softly, are the bricks in the wall of systemic exclusion. The room went still. Thomas Reed finally spoke. Everyone, allow me to make something clear, he said. Dr. Hayes isn't just a design partner or a silent investor. She is the backbone of this brand. Many of the collections you sell, from the Clara series to the Harlem Heritage line, came from her sketches, her history, her family. And today, you saw her as a problem. That, more than anything, makes me question the judgment of this team. He didn't raise his voice either, but his words cut deep. Jordan, still recording, moved slightly to get a better shot of the staff's reactions. Camille took a slow step forward, pulling something small from her coat pocket, a sapphire ring set in white gold. She held it between her fingers with a kind of reverence and placed it gently on the glass counter. This piece, she said, her voice calm and full, was designed after my grandmother's wedding band, Clara Hayes, born 1923. Couldn't try on jewelry in department stores because of her skin. This ring was my tribute to her legacy, and my quiet rebellion against a world that once treated women like her as invisible. I never wanted this store to be another place where people like her, like me, like my daughter, feel unseen. Natalie, watching from the corner chair near the window, blinked slowly, her mother's words branding themselves into her memory like gospel. Rachel looked like she was about to cry. Dr. Hayes, she began, please, I want to apologize. I didn't mean. I believe you, Camille said, but apologies without accountability are just rehearsals. Rachel swallowed hard. What happens now? Ava, still standing nearby, finally stepped closer. I'd like to say something, she said quietly. All eyes turned. When Dr. Hayes and her daughter walked in, I felt it, that shift, that hesitation, and I said nothing. I looked away, because I didn't want to challenge the system I was standing in. But now I realize, if I stay quiet, I'm just part of it. She turned to Camille. I'm sorry, and I want to do better. I want to be part of the store you meant this to be. Camille nodded once. Then you begin now. Thomas took a deep breath. Effective immediately, he said. Rachel is suspended pending full review. Camille and I will be reevaluating all customer service protocols, implicit bias training, and how promotions are handled. And Ava, if you're still willing, I'd like you to assist in designing a new leadership mentorship program. Ava's eyes welled up. Yes, absolutely. Karen let out a quiet huff. Well, this has all been dramatic. No, Camille replied, finally turning to her. This has been revealing and long overdue. Karen opened her mouth, then seemed to think better of it. She clutched her handbag and left the store, Douglas close behind her, his expression unreadable. Jordan approached Camille, phone still recording. Would you mind if this clip went public? He asked. There's a bigger conversation here, and I think a lot of people need to hear it. Camille paused, then nodded. Yes, let them see it. Not for the scandal, but for the clarity. She turned toward Thomas. Shall we continue this in your office? He gestured toward the hallway. Please. As Camille walked away from the counter, Natalie rose from her chair and joined her silently. She reached up and took her mother's hand, squeezing it, not with fear, but with pride. Not because of what Camille owned, but because of what she stood for, behind them. The staff stood in quiet reflection, the old air of privilege and exclusivity having been pierced wide open, and somewhere between shame and awakening, something new began to settle in its place: accountability. Camille stood at the head of the long mahogany table inside Thomas Reed's private office, the very room where dozens of design meetings, brand decisions, and quiet celebrations had taken place over the years, many of them involving her work, though her name rarely appeared on press releases. But today wasn't about press or product. Today was about principle. Through the glass walls, the jewelry store outside had returned to a hum of motion, but inside this room, time felt slower, deliberate. Thomas sat at the far end, his reading glasses perched at the tip of his nose, hands folded as he waited. Eva Morales stood to the right, still shaken but now upright, determined. Rachel Kim sat near the corner, pale and silent, her earlier confidence shattered. And Camille? She didn't sit. She stood, not to tower, but because this moment wasn't meant to feel comfortable. "Before we begin," she said, her voice steady, "let me make something clear. I didn't come here to shame anyone. I came here to see who we really are, and what I saw today tells me that while this store sparkles on the surface, underneath, there are fractures." No one responded. Camille let the silence settle before continuing. The worst part of what happened on that floor wasn't just the judgment. It was the certainty with which it was delivered, as if someone like me couldn't possibly belong here unless I announced my worth first. That's not just about race. It's about assumption. It's about how we measure dignity. And it needs to change. Today, Rachel's hands twisted in her lap, her voice finally emerging, barely above a whisper. "I didn't know who you were. I swear. If I had..." "You would have treated me better," Camille finished calmly. "And that's exactly why your apology falls short. Because the problem isn't who I am. It's how you treat people when you think they're no one." Thomas nodded slowly. "Camille, I take full responsibility for not ensuring that our staff reflects the values we claim to uphold. When I brought you in as a silent partner, I told myself your designs were enough, that your vision would speak for itself. But vision needs voice, and I should have made sure yours was heard more often. You're hearing it now," Camille replied, "and I don't intend to be silent anymore." Eva took a small breath, then stepped forward. "I'd like to help with the training program, if you still want me," she said. "Not just because I froze earlier, but because I want to be part of what this place can become. You gave me my first real opportunity, and I want to be someone who sees people, not just sells to them." Camille nodded. "Then you're already on your way." Thomas turned to Rachel. "You'll be placed on immediate suspension," he said, his tone firm. "During this time, we'll be conducting a full review of your past client interactions and decision-making practices. Pending that review, your employment here may be reconsidered, but only after completing a full program in equity training and restorative leadership." Rachel didn't argue. She simply nodded, tears brimming in her eyes but unshed. Camille turned toward her, not cruelly, but directly. "This isn't personal. It's systemic. And unless we confront it head-on, we're just polishing silver on a sinking ship." She then reached into her leather portfolio and slid a printed proposal across the table. "I'm launching a new initiative. It's called the Clara Standard, named after my grandmother, the one whose legacy inspired our best-selling ring. It will require all senior sales staff to undergo quarterly evaluations on inclusive practices, mystery shopper reviews, and cultural empathy workshops. Any bonuses tied to client retention will now also consider ethical service ratings, not just sales performance." Thomas picked up the document and scanned it, nodding slowly. "I'll back it fully. and I'll present it to the board myself. Camille turned to Ava. You'll be invited to join the committee. I want voices at the table who understand what it means to recognize harm before it hardens into habit. Ava swallowed, but her eyes lit with purpose. Yes, ma'am. I'd be honored. Just then, a knock came at the glass wall. Jordan Wells stepped in gently, holding his phone. I just posted the video. It's already picking up traction, and comments are flooding in. He paused, then added, Camille, people are calling this a masterclass in quiet strength. Camille offered a small smile, not of satisfaction, but of centeredness. Let them watch. Not for me, but for every girl who's been told you don't belong here just because she walked in with her head held high. Thomas rose. Camille, he said, there's something else I want to give you. He opened the drawer to his right and pulled out a folder. Inside was a proposal for a second store, a new branch planned for Harlem. I was going to wait until next quarter, he said, but I want you to lead this one, fully, with your name on the door, your team, and your vision from the start. Camille took the folder carefully, flipping through the documents. Natalie's face flashed through her mind. Clara's memory echoed in her chest. This time, she said softly, we do it right from the ground up. Thomas extended his hand. Partners? Camille shook it. Partners, she confirmed. As they walked out of the office, the energy in the store had shifted. The staff looked up, not with fear, but respect. Natalie stood near the counter, running her fingers over a new collection tray as Denise Carter smiled beside her. Karen and Douglas were long gone. The shame they left behind, that stayed, not as punishment, but as proof. Camille crossed the floor without looking back, her daughter beside her, and a future wide open in front. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't thrown a fit. She'd simply refused to disappear, and in doing so, she reminded everyone, dignity doesn't need permission. It simply arrives, demands nothing, and stays. Within hours of Jordan Wells posting the video, the internet erupted. The title read, Jewelry Store Manager Publicly Humiliates Black Woman Until She Finds Out Who Owns It. It took less than 3 hours for it to cross 1 million views. The clip showed everything. Rachel's dismissive tone, Karen's mocking laugh, Natalie's tearful whisper, and finally, Camille's poised, devastating truth. But it wasn't the drama that captivated people. It was the dignity. Camille didn't shout. She didn't seek vengeance. She simply held her ground. And now, the world was listening. Comment sections exploded with outrage, support, and personal stories. This is exactly what Black women face every day, and this is how you handle it with grace. Another read. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. Thousands of viewers praised Camille's restraint and clarity, many tagging major brands, asking what policies they had in place for anti-bias training. Even prominent voices, actors, journalists, CEOs, began reposting the story with the hashtag #SheOwnsIt. Camille didn't respond publicly. She didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken loud enough. Instead, she spent that evening with Natalie in their apartment, sitting quietly on the balcony as the city lights shimmered below them. Natalie scrolled through the comments on her phone, amazed. Mom, people are writing to us from South Africa, London, Ohio, everywhere. She looked up, eyes wide. They're proud of you. Camille sipped her tea and gave a small nod. Good. But I hope they're proud of themselves, too. It means they recognize something in the moment. Something that matters. Natalie leaned against her. I'm proud of you, she said softly. Not because you own the store, but because you didn't yell. You didn't lose control. Camille wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulder. Justice doesn't need a raised voice. Baby, it needs presence. It needs you to stand still, even when the world tries to erase you. The next morning, Whitmore and Reed issued a formal public statement, signed by Thomas Reed himself. It read, in part, "We failed. We failed to uphold the standards we claim to stand for. Dr. Camille Hayes is not only our partner, she is our moral compass. And yesterday, we ignored her reflection. That ends now." Alongside the letter, they announced the immediate launch of the Clara Standard, a comprehensive new training and accountability framework spearheaded by Camille, to ensure that no customer, no employee, would ever be devalued based on appearance again. Meanwhile, Rachel Kim was placed on administrative leave and began a mandatory restorative justice training course. Her name was never dragged through the mud online. Camille had insisted on that. "Accountability isn't revenge," she'd told Thomas. "It's a mirror. Let her choose whether to look into it." As for Ava Morales, the quiet sales associate who had frozen in the face of injustice, she was given a formal commendation and a new title, Leadership Fellow for Inclusive Practice. She was invited to speak at the first internal workshop alongside Camille, and this time, Ava spoke without shaking. "We're not just selling jewelry," she told the staff. "We're representing who deserves to wear it." Natalie, too, found herself transformed, no longer just a quiet teenager. She began journaling about the experience, eventually writing a piece for her school's newsletter titled, "What Dignity Sounds Like." In it, she wrote, "My mom didn't win by being loud. She won by standing still, by not shrinking, that day. She reminded me that style without substance is decoration. But dignity? That's eternal." When Camille read it, tears welled in her eyes for the first time since the incident. Not because of what happened in the store, but because her daughter had seen it, felt it, understood it. As the days passed, the store saw an increase in new customers, many of them first-time visitors who said they came because of the video. But what mattered more to Camille than foot traffic or sales was the shift in tone. Staff greeted every guest with respect, curiosity, and humility. No assumptions, no side glances, just honest service. For Camille, it wasn't redemption. It was a reset, a recommitment to the reason she invested in the brand in the first place, not just to sell jewelry, but to build a space where legacy, culture, and respect coexisted under glass and gold. And she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of what came next. 2 months later, the sun was shining on a crisp November morning as Camille stood before a modest stage draped in navy and gold banners bearing the inscription, "The Clara Foundation, Honoring Legacy Through Opportunity." It was the official launch of her scholarship fund for young women of color pursuing careers in jewelry design, arts, and entrepreneurship. The event was held in the rooftop garden of the soon-to-open second location of Whitmore and Reed, a boutique she had helped design from the ground up, this time in Harlem. Guests filled the space, community leaders, artists, students, local press, even a few of Camille's former mentors. The crowd wasn't flashy, it was intentional. And standing at the center of it all was Natalie, now visibly more confident, wearing a blazer over her usual cardigan, holding the mic with both hands. "My mom once told me," she began, glancing over at Camille, "that style without substance is just decoration, but dignity, that's eternal." A quiet wave of applause followed, not loud, but heartfelt, and Camille had to steady herself as tears welled gently in her eyes. Natalie continued, her voice clear and composed. "The Clara Foundation isn't just about money for school. It's about what happens when someone walks into a room and refuses to shrink. It's about building tables, not just asking for seats at them. It's about remembering women like my great-grandmother, Clara Hayes, who couldn't try on jewelry in stores. and making sure the next generation walks into every room knowing they belong there. Camille wasn't one to cry in public, but today was different. Today, her family's story wasn't being silenced, it was being amplified. When Natalie finished her speech and stepped down, Camille hugged her tightly, whispering, "You did more than I ever could at your age." Natalie smiled back. "You taught me how." Then Thomas Reed took the podium, holding up a sleek portfolio embossed with gold trim. "Camille," he announced, "on behalf of the board, and in honor of the legacy you've reignited in this industry, it is my privilege to present you with the final contract for our second flagship store." A hush fell as he handed it to her. Camille opened the folder and read the name engraved on the title page, Clara Fine Jewelry, a division of Whitmore and Reed. It wasn't her name on the storefront. It was her grandmother's, her inspiration, her why. The crowd erupted in applause, and even Ava, now promoted and working directly under Camille as part of the diversity and experience team, wiped a tear from her cheek. Behind the scenes, Ava had helped revise company training manuals, reorganize onboarding procedures, and implement the Clara standard across all departments. And she wasn't alone. Jordan Wells, the journalist whose video had gone viral, had returned not as a reporter, but as a media consultant helping the brand tell better stories. Honest ones, rooted in equity and lived experience. Ava wasn't just helping rebuild the culture, she was helping reimagine it. And Camille had made sure she had a seat at every table. As the ceremony wrapped, guests began to mingle. A catering team passed around champagne and small crystal trays of hors d'oeuvres. Natalie stood near the edge of the balcony, gazing out over Harlem's skyline. Camille joined her. Both of them quiet for a while, letting the cool breeze wash over their thoughts. "You know," Natalie said, "this store, it doesn't just feel different because it's ours. It feels like it sees people." Camille smiled. "That's the point. Jewelry is about reflection. We wear it to express who we are, or who we want to be. But a store like this has to reflect something more." She turned toward the large glass window where young girls from local design schools were trying on sample pieces from the mentorship collection. "She reminds me of who I used to be," Camille said softly, watching one girl examine a pendant with wide, excited eyes. Natalie followed her gaze. "And who she can become?" Camille nodded. "Exactly." Later that evening, as the guests dispersed and the sun dipped behind the city, Camille remained on the garden terrace alone. The buzz of conversation had quieted. The music had faded. But the energy lingered, strong and sacred. She looked down at her hands, which once struggled to sketch ideas on napkins in crowded cafes. Now they were signing contracts, mentoring others, and rebuilding an entire culture in an industry that had tried to keep women like her out for decades. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. It simply read, "I watched the video again today. I'm sorry. I see now. Rachel." Camille read it twice, then powered off the phone. No reply needed. Sometimes the most powerful answers come in silence. She walked to the edge of the rooftop, looked out at the city below, and breathed. Not because she'd won, but because she'd stayed true. In a world that tried to tell her she didn't belong, Camille didn't fight for a seat. She built a new room, and this time, the door was wide open. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next video.